It's a topsy-turvy time in Washington, and who knows more about it than Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer.
Hello.
How are you?
Be here. Good to be here with you, Marcia, anytime.
Chuck, here's the bottom line. The tariffs have rocked the market. People in New York and around the country are terrified about retirement income, college funds. When is it going to end? What's happening and what can be done?
Donald Trump has created chaos with these tariffs, and they affect New York almost worse than any other place.
Because of the financial market.
Financial markets, tourism. We depend on exports and imports more than any other place. It's affecting all of America. If he puts these tariffs in effect, the average family will pay close to $4,400 more out of their pockets. The price of food and medicine and gas and clothing goes up. The average person who's put away money for their retirement and is saving with their 401ks and stuff could lose close to $100,000. And it's chaos. Donald Trump's own people are arguing about it. The chief tariff organizer for Trump is a guy named Navarro, and Musk calls him a moron. They say different reasons every day for why they're doing it. Now, they backed off a little when the bond markets got bad, but it's still very bad.
Very topsy-turvy.
And it's going to hurt New York dramatically. I put a bill on the floor of the Senate saying only Congress can do the tariffs. And we did get 6 or 7 Republicans who have joined us in it. We hope we can get something done.
So let me ask you this. The White House is trying to say, to go after you, to say that you and Nancy Pelosi, I know it's in the 90s and the 2000s, but you once supported tariffs and to give tariffs to punish China. How is that different from what you did today and what they
different.
And what they're doing today?
I've always been a China hawk, and specific narrow tariffs aimed at China and how they take advantage of us is a good idea. Trump didn't just go against China.
He went about everybody.
And here's the problem. The way to put pressure on China is to get the whole world to go against them. Instead, Trump turned the whole world against us and with China. So it's a huge mistake. It's one of the most chaotic, unthought through. Every day they had a different reason why they were doing tariffs. One day, get rid of the deficit. One day, bring manufacturing here. One day, so we can cut taxes on the billionaires. Crazy.
So how do we come out of it?
Well, we hope that the markets, we hope that Trump will see the error of his ways, and we hope more Republicans will join us. Congress has jurisdiction over tariffs. And so Trump is really, presidents have always done it with Congress's acquiescence, but Congress can take back that authority. And Maria Cantwell put together a bill. As I said, it has 6 or 7 Republicans. I put an amendment on the floor of the budget bill saying the only tariffs that can go into effect are those passed by Congress. We would do it in a smart, Democrats and Republicans, in a smart, rational way, aimed particularly at the bad things China does. But right now, it's going to hurt our economy dramatically. And the faith that people have that this administration knows what it's doing on all kinds of economic things has been rocked.
I have one more question. I just wondered if there's been any discussion about investigating whether there was so many market manipulation, because there were people in the Trump administration that knew that was going to happen. Is there any possibility that you would call for investigation?
Today, a group of senators, including myself, called for 2 places to investigate. One, the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission. They have jurisdiction, but they're appointed by Trump. But the second are the attorneys general. The attorneys general across the country, New York's, California's, Massachusetts, you name it, has jurisdiction. We've asked them to look into it because Trump announced early in the day, it's a good time to buy. And if people in the government or whoever knew what he was going to do ahead of time, that could be, we have to get the details, insider trading. So there should be an investigation because this administration, as you know, Marcia, a lot of self-dealing.
So let me ask you this question. You wrote, the reason I wanted you on the show was that you wrote a book, Anti-Semitism in America.
Right.
So first of all, my first question to you is, why did you write this book? And who is it for?
Okay, great question. Why did I write the book? You know, I was brought up in what we Jewish people in America would call the Golden Medina, the Golden Era. I was born in 1950, and first everyone was advancing on the ladder. My grandparents were poor, my father struggled, but made it into the middle class. That was not just true of Jews. But second, the shadow of the Holocaust and the horror of the Holocaust hung over America. So lots of traditional ways of anti-Semitism were reduced and even eliminated. So that in the past, Jews couldn't live in a certain neighborhood. That changed. Jews couldn't join this firm or go into that profession. That changed. Even the sort of innuendos changed. Okay. So it was a great 50 years. It began to change. Whenever there's trouble, people take it out on the Jews.
But why the Jews?
Conor Cruise O'Brien, the great Irish poet, said anti-Semitism is a light sleeper. It's one of the things I explore in the book. For 5,000 years this has happened. So in 2001, 9/11, you got some of it. Oh, there were conspiracy theories. The Jews knew about it and they all left the tower early. Bull. In 2008, the international Jewish conspiracy, Soros and all that. But it didn't really erupt in a serious, really troubling way after October 7th. And then anti-Semitism skyrocketed. And I'm not just saying criticism.
Don't you think that's crazy that after October 7th, which was an attack on the Jewish state and on Jews, and 1,000 people were killed and more taking hostage, that it gave rise to anti-Semitism?
It did, and there were a lot of protests against what Israel and Netanyahu did. I've been critical of him on occasion. But that's not anti-Semitism. What's anti-Semitism is when you go after Jews as Jews. So, after October 7th, Jewish delis, a rock thrown through their window. You're a Zionist deli. Remember the guy on the subway?
I do.
Every Zionist get off the subway. That meant every Jew. The head of the Brooklyn Museum, who happens to be Jewish, it has nothing to do with Israel. Her house was smeared in red paint. These instances skyrocketed, and Jews of my generation, Marcia, began to say, which we never thought before, could it happen here? Could the horrors of what's happened to...
Did it make you scared?
It made me... It's a warning. Do I think it'll happen? No. But am I worried, and do we have to be vigilant? Yes. So I thought about it. I gave a speech on the floor. I was the first to criticize the left about anti-Semitism, which is the examples I gave all came from the left, although there's plenty from the right, believe me. And I thought about it. I gave a speech, but that wasn't enough. I felt I had to write a book, and I aimed it at 5 different audiences. First, my generation, our generation. We feel sort of alone and isolated. Here, all of a sudden, America's been so great for so long. What is happening? So they would understand through the eyes of I'm the highest ranking Jewish elected official, not only today, but ever in America. That. Second, their children, our children. They are pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, basically, but they don't know the history. They don't know how Israel struggled, how Jewish people struggled. Third are non-Jews. There are a lot of non-Jews who are very, friendly to Jewish people, not at all anti-Semitic, but they sometimes say, why are you making such a big fuss? It's not so bad. The book shows why it could be. Fourth is I aimed it at anti-Semites on the right, but particularly on the left. Me being a Democrat, it's easy for a right-winger to criticize anti-Semitism on the left or a left-winger to criticize, but I thought I could have particular salience talking about it on the left,
right,
where it has been there's too much of it, as again, hesitate to say, that is not meaning criticizing of Israel per se as anti-Semitic. And the fifth is all the young people of America who know nothing about the history of Jews or anti-Semitism. Listen to these 2 statistics. 20% of people under 30 say the Holocaust was a fake, it never existed.
Wow. I
lost relatives in the Holocaust. My great-grandmother and 35 of her family were shot machine gunned by the Nazis. And second, another 50% know nothing about it. The publisher I chose is an expert at getting this book in schools, in colleges, in high schools. I hope it will be required reading, because education, if every American read this book, anti-Semitism would decline. That's why I wrote it.
So we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back with more from Chuck Schumer. We're back with Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer and his book on anti-Semitism. You were talking about educating people. And in your book, and I want to talk about this because it's the Passover season, you quote something from the Haggadah, and it says, "And you shall teach your children," and you talk about the fight to fight off the possibility of future enslavement. You want to teach people about that. Tell me about why you want to do that.
Well, because anti-Semitism always goes together with, when something bad happens, and people are less happy, it increases. But the antidote is to show, you know, there's so much that people don't understand. They don't understand. For instance, the Jews never had a state for hundreds of years. We were persecuted not just by the Nazis. That was the worst of all, probably the worst.
But it was generation after generation.
After generation.
After a persecution.
A persecution. And so people have to know that this is real and this is dangerous, that it doesn't, you know, and it can lurk behind the shadows and then come up. So to teach the generations of who the Jewish people really are and what our culture is, and to teach them why we need to have an Israel. By the way, this is an example of anti-Semitism. There are some, particularly on the left, far left, who want every other people to get a state.
Except Israel.
Except Israel. Now, in the book I talk about, Abba Eban once came to Harvard. We invited him because the hard left then was saying, stop Zionist imperialism, you know, it shouldn't be in Israel. And he pointed to them in the gallery. It was in a big auditorium. And he said, I'm pointing to you up there. He said, for generations, everyone was allowed to do things and the Jews were not. Everyone could be a farmer, the Jew could not. Everyone could be a carpenter, the Jew could not. Everyone could go to Moscow, the Jew could not. We call that anti-Semitism. He said, every time a new nation becomes, a new people gets their nationhood, you applaud it, except when the Jewish people do. They shouldn't have a state. That, he said, is anti-Semitism. I believe it is.
So you talk also about the role of social media.
Yes.
And the role of social media in perpetuating tropes and stereotypes.
Yes.
What should be done about that?
Okay, there are several things that could be done. But there are always, when new technologies occur, that's very good in a way, but it allows anti-Semitism to spread. Anti-Semitism had a dramatic rise the century after Gutenberg invented the printing press, because all these anti-Semitic tracts were printed and sent around. It's worse with the social media for 4 reasons. I document them. 1, it has such range. 2, there's no editors. You have an editor. But anything goes on the social media, true or not true.
Absolutely.
3, it can be anonymous.
Right.
And 4, it aggregates people. So there have always been anti-Semites sitting in their little rooms cursing at the darkness or at themselves.
So how do you do it?
But they all get together. We need to fight back on the social media and answer it. The ADL is doing some of it, but I believe Jewish and non-Jewish people alike should spend much more time combating all the lies and misinformation.
Isn't there a role of social media to combat hate speech?
Yes, and they should. That's what we're saying. Look, it is free speech.
Does government have to have a role in that?
It's a difficult issue because it's free speech, but I think that if there was a lot of emphasis and encouragement to fight hatred online by government and not a law, but encouragement, it could make a real difference. So the anti-Semites gain the upper hand because they're on all the time. ADL is now trying, but that's the best. The best antidote always to anti-Semitism, which is always there, is education and fighting it back. That's why I wrote the book.
So I have to ask you this question. There's a lot of anti-Semitism we've seen on college campuses.
Yes.
And although you've been very critical of Donald Trump, he is trying to do something about anti-Semitism on college campuses. Is he going about it the right way or the wrong way? And what do you want to see happen?
First, it is right. I've been very critical of Columbia. I write in the book how some of these Harvard students wouldn't let a menorah. We used to always have a menorah at Harvard in the Harvard yard. Right. That's anti-Semitic. That's against Jews. True. Okay. So should there be efforts to curb anti-Semitism, and should the government, the U.S. government, discourage it? Yes. But you don't use what Elon Musk says is a chainsaw. You take all the money. When they took $400 million away from Columbia, no one even knew what it was. Columbia, most of the research, most of the money they get from the federal government does cancer research at at New York Presbyterian. It saves lives. You don't stop that. Lots of the money goes to make the education of the kids better. 95% of the kids didn't participate in any protest. So make it more pointed. Don't just go after the colleges per se, but say, here's what you did wrong. Here's what you have to do right.
So you're saying that this effort to take money away from Columbia and Harvard and all these other schools.
Without any specificity.
Is misplaced. It's just, as you say, a chainsaw.
It's a chainsaw. And look, these universities do a lot of good things, too. You don't throw out the good. This is true of the Trump administration in general. It was true with the tariffs. Instead of being specific and pointed at something that might be wrong, they go way overboard.
One of the things that I was moved by in your book was you talk about the fact that
and I've been very critical of Columbia, Harvard, and all these places, as you know.
Jews making two bets.
Mm-hmm.
They bet on Israel and having a Jewish state, and they bet on America to be a place that would be receptive to Jews and people of all faiths, what you call irrational tolerance.
Yes.
So why has this gone away? Why has this bet, which you say was a good bet, now turning into maybe a bad bet?
Several reasons. One, the social media has much more prominence than anything had before. Two, when people are upset about things, some people are pushed to be anti-Semitic, blame the Jews for this, for that, for the other thing, which we have nothing to do with. That's been throughout history. And people now are upset about the conditions in the world, at what's going on in the country, at how we are not as prosperous as we used to be. And oftentimes that is a ground for anti-Semitism, and that's why I felt I had to write the book. For Israel, because we Jewish people believe in Israel and depend on Israel and believe strongly in the Jewish state, but mainly for America. That's why I called it a warning. Okay, it's a warning to America. Please, and I write various things we can do to stop it. But don't just shrug your shoulders and say, "Oh, this is nothing." All too often, when people look at the Germans, now America's not Germany and never will be, and thank God. But in 1910, the Jews were prosperous. They thought they had a great place in Germany. They thought they were accepted, and it all turned on them. We don't want that to happen in America at all. I don't think it will, but I wrote the book because deep in our hearts, we have to fight against the possibility that something worse could happen.
Do you think Americans know that George Washington actually wrote a letter to a synagogue in Rhode Island supporting the right of Jews to worship as they see fit?
There's a famous expression, it's in the movie Hamilton, everyone should be able to prosper under their own vine and fig tree.
Right.
George Washington wrote that to the Jewish community. America's always been pro-Jewish and anti-Jewish. Pro-Jewish, George Washington. Anti-Jewish, Peter Stuyvesant, who started New York, when 28 expatriate Jews who were kicked out of Brazil came here, he said, I don't want them. And you know what? It's in the book. The Dutch West India Company, which was running the place, said the Jews are hardworking, prosperous people. We should admit them, and they overruled Stuyvesant. That's the two strains.
So we're going to end this section with this quote. Isn't America a great country? Who said that?
Grandma Minnie, my grandmother, to Tip O'Neill.
To Tip O'Neill when?
When I was sworn in as a congressman. She told them the story of their family and how they were poor and they came to America, and she used to walk 5 miles to save a nickel car fare to work in the sweatshops, and all of us, and her husband, her son struggled. And here I am, Congressman. She said, what a great country America is. I still believe that, Marcia. That's why I'm in public life. But we always have to worry about anti-Semitism now more than we have for a very long time. So I wrote the book. Folks, please buy it. Give it to your children. Give it to your friends.
And it's a warning.
It's a warning.
Chuck Schumer, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Marcia.
And thank you at home for joining us as well. And it's a lesson.